Not a mic, but if anyone can hear me, then I will certainly grab one. I first of all want to thank Gary for inviting me out here. I haven't spent all that much time in northern Macomb County, so it's wonderful to be out here to learn about the issues and to learn from all of you about what your feelings are about the state of Michigan and what we should be doing to get our state back on track. As Gary was saying, I've been blessed with a wonderful family, and I have to plug my wife, because Amy Chapman, my name of my wife, she ran the Obama campaign for the entire state of Michigan, and I think she did an amazing job. And I take a point of pride at the work she did and all the work that you did to help her, because it's my analysis that when we kicked McCain out of Michigan, that was the beginning of the end for his national campaign. Because as you recall, ever since he left Michigan, it was bad news from then on out for John McCain. So I think Michigan deserves a very special place, frankly, with President Obama. And that kind of morphs into my talk, because as Gary says, you know, I'm running for governor in this state, and we're facing a very important election in 2010. Every election is important, but 2010 is uniquely important for a couple of reasons. Number one, we have to elect a brand new governor because Jennifer Granholm can't run again because of term limits. Secondly, the state Senate is up for an election. They're up for an election once every 4 years. And so this is the 4-year cycle for the state Senate. Then, of course, the state House is up for re-election. But the last reason why it's an incredibly important election is that whoever's in power after this next election, they're going to be the political people that will be redrawing all the lines for the House, for the Senate, and for members of Congress, because we're going to do a new census in 2010. And so whoever is elected after the 2010 election will be redrawing the lines. And most national people think that Michigan is probably going to lose another congressional district, because our population in Michigan has pretty much stayed the same from 10 years ago when the last census was done. But other parts of the country, you know, Arizona, Texas, Florida, California, they all keep growing. And so they're likely to pick up a couple additional seats. So Democrats have to win in 2010 for those reasons. But there's obviously another fundamental reason why Democrats have to win, is that we approach state government and the role of government entirely different than what the Republicans do. And as we all know, Michigan is facing some very difficult times right now, with the collapse of the auto industry, with the ripple effect of the economy, of what the impact of losing all those high-paying jobs are. The UAW has lost, 200,000 members over the last few years. I was actually meeting with Dick Long of the UAW this morning, and he was talking about the impact on the union. And so it's had a devastating effect on the workers, but also all sorts of other businesses and workers that rely upon a strong, healthy auto industry. So we have to make some fundamental changes in this state, and we have to be careful to choose the right kind of leader that will have a sense of what we have to do, and then have the gumption and the wherewithal to actually implement plans to get legislation enacted. So to me, the election for 2010 is really about how can we create new jobs in Michigan for our working families, and how can we, in the short term, and then how can we rebuild the economy for a longer-term economic growth in this state. And I frankly think there are 5 critical factors that we have to address in order to rebuild the economy and to get more jobs in Michigan. First and foremost is a tried and true strategy that frankly Franklin Delano Roosevelt did back in the 1930s when we had the other humongously major recession, is that we need to rebuild our infrastructure in Michigan. And we need to get as much federal dollars as we possibly can to rebuild our roads. I drove up Rochester Road, then I came over on Avon Road to 23 miles and south on Mound, and the roads are horrible, and this is the condition all over Michigan. I was downriver last night, down on Southfield Road, south of I-94, the Dix-Toledo Road. that road's in horrendous shape. So we have a lot of roads that could be rebuilt. And frankly, having a very good infrastructure is critical for business because they want to be able to move goods, move products on good roads. We also have a lot of outdated schools. A lot of our schools, elementary schools, were built right after the Second World War when we had the beginning of the baby boomers. But a lot of those schools, frankly, are not designed for the kinds of tools, the internet and, and high-tech stuff in schools. So we could really rebuild a lot of our schools to better serve our young kids. We also need to expand the internet in Michigan because there are parts of Michigan that have broadband, which is a very fast internet, but then there are other parts of Michigan that still have very slow internet. And we have to have a very cutting-edge internet system, again, for new businesses that rely upon that form of communication. And so I think the bottom line is that we have to get as much federal dollars to Michigan. And that's why I brought up the point about McCain being kicked out of Michigan, is because Obama, frankly, owes Michigan a lot because of the support we gave him. Now it's time for us to redraw that favor and really get a lot of money back to Michigan. So we have to elect a governor that's going to put consistent pressure on the president to do right by Michigan, but also to put pressure on the Michigan delegation, our congressional delegation, to make sure that they're trying to bring back as much money as possible to Michigan to put as many of our people back to work that have lost jobs and need work. So that's factor number one. Factor number two, which I touched upon a little bit, is education. The educational system in this state is absolutely critical for rebuilding the foundation for economic growth in this state. And there are three parts to the educational system, and they all serve very important roles. The first part that Gary worked with me on in the past is obviously K through 12. We have to teach our children, high standards and make sure they get the great education so they're prepared for the world of work and they're prepared for going on for college, frankly. So we have to have a top-notch school system, not only in terms of facilities, which I mentioned, but also in terms of supporting our teachers and making sure we have reasonable class size so our kids can get the proper amount of attention they need. So that's point number one. Point number two is community colleges serve an incredibly important purpose. A lot of these laid-off workers whose skills may not be up to speed for the new jobs that are coming on down the road, they need to be able to go back to community college to get new skills and be retrained. So we have to have a very vibrant community college. And community colleges also serve a very important role for those young people that can't have to work, while they're going to school. It's closer to home, and it's more accessible in terms of getting, a broader education. So community colleges are very important. We have to support. And finally, the university system is also extremely important. If you look around the country and you notice where a lot of these new businesses, Google, Microsoft, these high-tech industries, they're locating in states where there's a big emphasis being placed upon higher education because they want to attract top talent to these new businesses. And so we have to invest in our higher education system to make sure that as many of our young people get the kind of education they can get in order to get good jobs with these new high-tech firms. So overall, the educational system is extremely important, and we have to, of course, work with our brothers and sisters within the MEA and the American Federation of Teachers Michigan as we make improvements and improve the quality of standards and everything else. The third critical element, I think, to rebuilding our foundation for new jobs and economic growth is we are blessed in this state with a tremendous amount of natural resources. We got the amazing Great Lakes, we got forests, we've got rivers, we got the Lake St. Clair, we got all these wonderful areas that really add a dimension to our lives in Michigan that frankly a lot of other states don't have. And I look upon it as a critical economic asset that we need to do a much better job in marketing, in protecting and nurturing, and using it as something that will bring business to Michigan because it frankly adds a quality of life dimension that states like Ohio frankly don't have it. They all come to Michigan for vacation, and we need to look upon the natural resources in a different way, more than just something, let me back up. We should not look upon the natural resources as something to exploit, but as something to protect because it really serves a wonderful purpose in adding a dimension to our lives, and it also, frankly, increases economic activity because of tourism and all the jobs associated with hunting and fishing and everything else. So protecting our natural resources is critical. The final factor is healthcare reform. And this is something that Gary mentioned that I've been working on the last couple of years in my paying job, so to speak. You know, healthcare costs, as probably all of you have experienced, have gone through the roof, not only for labor unions, but also for businesses. You know, right now, most labor unions, when they're engaged in collective bargaining, they're not even talking about getting a wage increase. They're primarily talking about protecting their healthcare benefits because the insurance companies keep jacking up the rates, you know, double digits, much beyond the cost of inflation. And this is really hurting the ability of unionized workers to get better pay because, frankly, they understand the importance of having health insurance for their families. Now, from the point of view of employers, it's a real problem as well because a lot of Michigan manufacturing entities, they're frankly competing on a global economic scale. Michigan businesses are competing against foreign companies that don't have to provide health insurance because their home country provides it. And so we have to reform healthcare for two purposes. One is to reduce the costs, and secondly, we got 1.3 million people in Michigan, a lot of which are working, have no access to health care whatsoever. And this is really hurting a lot of wonderful people in terms of it affects their personal health, which affects their productivity where they're working, but it also affects their home life. So we have to reform health care in this state. It's a critical important. So those are kind of the four, what I consider critical factors or critical conditions that the next governor has to address in order to be able to create a long-term foundation for economic growth. And again, that's improving our infrastructure, which will also provide a lot of good jobs right now to put people back to work. Secondly is the educational system, K through 12, community colleges, and higher ed. The third is protecting our natural resources and utilizing them as a real economic asset. And then, of course, healthcare. The final thing I want to talk about before I open up for questions and getting all your feedback, because I don't pretend to know all the answers. I want to hear what you all think. Whether you think I'm on the right track or maybe on the wrong track. But the final thing I want to talk about that I think is critically important as you all make up your mind on whom you want to support for governor in 2010 is, I think we need to have new style of leadership in terms of being governor of this state. We are, as I said at the beginning of my talk, we are going through some very difficult times. We have to make some fundamental changes to reposition this state. And so I think we need to, as well as implement policy, we need to change the way we govern in Michigan. I think state government should be engaging people like all of you in a much more aggressive way to get your ideas and your input as we make these political decisions to move forward. One of the things I learned from the Obama campaign is that he thinks it's very important to get people involved in his campaign as well as involved as he's governing this country. He's seeking input on healthcare reform. He's seeking input on a variety of things. And I think that needs to happen at the state level as well. You know, I think Jennifer Granholm has had a difficult job the last several years. I think she's done a pretty good job under very difficult circumstances. But I do think that we need to change the way we govern in the sense that we want to get more and more people involved from the private sector so we can have more political involvement in the decisions that we're making. And so one of the things I talk about is that I want to partner with organizations like the UAW. I want to partner with organizations like the MEA or some businesses out there to figure out what we can do to really position this state, to grow new industries, attract more jobs, and make Michigan, once again, the most wonderful place in the world to live, work, and raise a family. So I think I want to stop there. But I want to stop there by saying one final thing that, I'm going around the state right now speaking to groups about this. And I'm learning a lot from people in terms of what other folks think is important in this state. And so I'm really interested in your thoughts and opinions. And I want to keep in touch with you afterwards. So there's a sign-in sheet on the clipboard that's floating around. And I really would like all of you to sign in, provide me with your email address so I can continue this dialogue with you. I have a card here that's got both my email address and my cell phone, which I carry around all the time. And so I want to encourage all of you, as you come up with ideas or suggestions, even after I leave tonight, that you should feel free to contact me. But why don't we stop there and take your questions and comments and tell me whether you think I'm on the right track with my ideas or whether you think I'm missing something.